there is a particular kind of light that only comes in the late afternoon, golden, slanted, unhurried. It makes even ordinary things look different, softer, somehow more real, as if the world has finally stopped performing and is simply being. You know, there's something interesting about the second half of human life, the afternoon of life, if you want to call it that. Not a slow fading, not merely the long walk toward an ending, but a different kind of living altogether, one most of us were never taught to recognize. The difficulty is this: most of us arrive at the afternoon still carrying the maps we drew in the morning. We measure our worth by how many people need us. We look for meaning in achievement, in noise, in the comfort of being surrounded. And when those things grow quiet, as they always do, we mistake that quieting for loss. But here's the thing: nothing has been taken. Something has been offered. There are 4 things the soul needs in the afternoon of life. Not a partner, not a full house, not a calendar packed with evidence of being needed. 4 things that live entirely on the inside and yet make everything on the outside more bearable, more true. Let us begin. Asterisk, asterisk. The first thing the soul needs in the afternoon of life, asterisk, asterisk, is something most of us have never been taught to value: the ability to keep its own company. Somewhere in the transition between the first half of life and the second, a silence arrives. It does not announce itself. It does not knock. One day you simply notice it. In the house, in the mornings, in the space where activity used to live. The phone rings less often. The schedule thins out. The roles that once defined your hours, worker, provider, needed one, busy one, begin to recede the way a tide pulls back from the shore, slowly and without apology, leaving behind only the sand and the sound of your own breathing. For many people, this silence feels like an accusation, as if the world has looked at them and quietly decided, we no longer require you, and so they reach for noise. They fill the silence with television, with errands invented just to have somewhere to go, with calls to people who may or may not want to hear from them. They keep moving because stillness feels dangerous, because somewhere along the way they learn to confuse their usefulness with their worth. And now, without the constant proof of being needed, they are not quite sure they exist. The deepest loneliness a human being can experience is not the loneliness of having no one nearby. It is the loneliness of having lost connection with the deepest part of themselves. You can be surrounded by grandchildren, by a spouse, by the warmth of a full table, and still be utterly alone inside if you have never learned to inhabit your own interior life. Think of it this way. Imagine you have lived your entire life in a house, but only ever in the front rooms, the living room, the kitchen, the places where guests are received, meals are prepared, duties are performed. You have never or rarely walked into the back rooms, the quiet ones, the ones that hold old things, half-finished thoughts, the dreams you set aside, the questions you never had time to ask yourself. For decades, that was fine. You were busy in the front rooms. There was always something to do, someone to tend to, a reason to stay near the door. But the afternoon of life asks you, gently and persistently, to walk deeper into the house. Not because the front rooms are gone, not because the people you love no longer matter, but because a house you have never fully explored is not truly yours, and a life you have never fully inhabited is not truly lived. This is what I mean by becoming who you actually are, a lifelong process. In youth, we build identity outward. We take on roles, put on masks, learn which parts of ourselves are acceptable and which are better hidden. We become the responsible one, the strong one, the giving one, the one who holds everything together. And there is nothing wrong with that. Those roles are real. They matter. They often contain genuine love. But the tragedy arrives when we become the role so completely that we forget there was ever a person underneath it. Old age, if we are willing to let it, performs a kind of excavation. It strips away the masks, not cruelly, but inevitably. And what it leaves behind is the raw, unhidden self, the self that was always there, waiting patiently beneath all that performance, wondering when you would finally come back for it. Learning to keep your own company means learning to be with that self, to sit with it without immediately reaching for distraction, to listen to what it actually feels, what it actually wants, what it has been trying to say for years through the noise of a busy life. It does not mean becoming a hermit. It does not mean turning away from love or withdrawing from the people who matter. A soul that knows how to keep its own company is not a cold soul. It is a rooted one. It loves more freely precisely because it does not depend on others to hold it upright. It knows, I am here. Even in the silence, I am still here. And in that knowing, there is a peace that no amount of company can manufacture, but once found, makes every human connection richer because it is chosen freely rather than clung to out of fear. The afternoon light is strange and beautiful, but you have to be willing to stop and look at it. But learning to sit with yourself leads inevitably to the second thing the soul must face in the afternoon of life. And this one asks for a different kind of courage altogether, the courage to open the door to the darkness within. Once a person begins to keep their own company, once the silence is no longer something to escape but something to enter, they will discover something unexpected. The interior life is not all warmth and golden memory. There are shadows in there, old angers that were never spoken, guilt that has been carried so long it has begun to feel like furniture, grief that was set down somewhere during a busy year and never properly returned to, jealousies we are ashamed of, fears we never named, choices we made and then buried beneath the forward momentum of living, hoping they would not resurface. They surface in the afternoon. They always do. Let's call these the shadow. The parts of ourselves we have refused to acknowledge, not because they are monstrous. Most of them are not monstrous at all. They are simply human. They are the parts we decided at some point were incompatible with the image we were trying to maintain. The image of the good person, the strong person, the selfless person, the person who had it together. And so we pushed them down. And they went, but they did not disappear. Here's the thing. What we refuse to see in ourselves does not vanish. It goes underground, and from underground it runs us. It shapes our reactions without our knowing. It causes us to lash out at people for reasons we cannot explain. It makes us project onto others the very things we cannot tolerate in ourselves. It turns into bitterness when we are not watching. It turns into the chronic low ache of a life that never quite felt honest. The shadow can be imagined as a locked room at the back of that same house we spoke of earlier. For years, we walked past that door every day. Sometimes we heard something moving inside, but we told ourselves, not now. I don't have time. I'm not ready. It's better left alone. And perhaps during the busy years it was. Perhaps the timing was never right. But in the afternoon of life, the house grows quieter, and that room begins to knock, not to punish you. The shadow is not your enemy. It does not want to destroy you. It wants to be seen. And here's the part that most people miss. The purpose of encountering the shadow is not self-condemnation. It is wholeness. The goal is not to divide yourself into the acceptable parts and the shameful parts, but to realize that all of it is you. The generosity and the selfishness, the courage and the cowardice, the love you gave freely, and the moments you withheld it out of pride or fear. All of it, you. A person who has faced their shadow walks differently. There is less rigidity in them, less need to perform. They do not need to spend energy maintaining the fiction of having never been wrong, never been petty, never been broken in some small or large way. They have looked at those things honestly, and they are still standing, which means they know on a cellular level that the truth of who they are is survivable. And something else happens too. When you have honestly looked at your own darkness, you become gentler with other people. When you know that you have also been selfish, you stop being so quick to condemn selfishness in others. When you have seen your own fear, you can meet fear in another person without contempt. This is not weakness. It is a deep and hard-won humility, the kind that cannot be performed, only earned. Many people come to the end of life still wrestling with a story they have never been honest about, still maintaining the version of events in which they were always right, always the one who suffered most, always the victim of other people's failings. That kind of story does not bring peace. It brings bitterness. It keeps the past alive as a wound, rather than allowing it to become gradually something that has been understood and set down. The invitation of the afternoon is not to revisit every painful thing and suffer over it again. It is simply to stop pretending, to stop whitening the record, to allow the full, complicated, genuinely human story of your life to be what it actually was, imperfect, contradictory, sometimes beautiful, sometimes not, and to find that you can hold that story with something closer to compassion than shame. You do not have to excavate everything at once. You do not have to become a different person overnight. You only have to begin paying attention. When a reaction feels too large for the moment that triggered it, pause. When an old memory keeps returning, sit with it rather than pushing it away. When you notice yourself blaming someone else with unusual intensity, wonder quietly what that heat is really about. The light does not flood in all at once, but each small act of honesty is like opening a window. And the remarkable thing, the thing that surprises almost everyone who does this work, is that looking into the darkness does not make you darker. It frees something that has been trapped in there, something that feels, when it finally gets out, a little like relief, a little like grace. And when the darkness has been faced with some measure of honesty, something else becomes possible. The third thing the soul needs in the afternoon of life, a meaning that truly belongs to this season. There is a particular sorrow that visits people in the afternoon of life, and it is more quiet than grief, more stubborn than sadness. It is the feeling of having become irrelevant, of having outlived your usefulness, of waking up each morning and finding no task waiting that feels large enough to justify the waking. Here's what I've noticed. We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of the morning, and yet that is exactly what most of us try to do. We bring the morning's measuring sticks into the afternoon. Production, achievement, recognition, speed, expansion, and then wonder why we feel like failures when those metrics no longer apply. Youth asks, what can I build? What can I conquer? How much can I become? Those are the right questions for youth. They drive the engine of a life's first half. Without them, nothing would be created. No family raised, no career built, no contribution made to the world. The morning program is good and necessary, but it belongs to the morning. The afternoon asks different questions, quieter questions, questions that require you to slow down enough to hear them. What do all the things I have lived through want to become within me? What have I learned that I have not yet passed on? What is the distillation of a life? Not its achievements, but its understanding. Meaning in the second half of life does not live in output. It lives in depth. It lives in the transformation of experience into wisdom, of suffering into compassion, of memory into something that can be given gently without demand to those who come after. Think of a great tree in autumn. It is not producing new growth. It is not reaching outward and upward as it did in spring. But it is not doing nothing. It is drawing inward, concentrating, storing what it has gathered over a long season. And when the right moment comes, a conversation, a question, a young person looking for a handhold in the dark, it gives something that only long seasons can produce. You cannot manufacture that kind of giving when you are 20. It requires the particular knowledge that only time and loss and survival can teach. I think of a woman who spent 40 years as a teacher, then retired and felt utterly purposeless, as if the bell had rung for the last time and no one had need of her anymore. She said she felt like an instrument no one played. What she eventually discovered, not all at once but slowly, was that the classroom had not closed. It had only changed its shape. The lessons she had once delivered from a blackboard could now be offered through a letter, a conversation, a memory told at the right moment to someone who needed it. The meaning of her afternoon was not smaller than the meaning of her morning. It was different. It had moved inward and it moved outward again in a different form, not as instruction, but as transmission, not as teaching, but as witness. This is the shift that the afternoon of life requires, from doing to being, from performing to distilling, from building a life to understanding one. And here is the crucial thing. The meaning available in old age does not require an audience. It does not require recognition or applause or anyone confirming that you have gotten it right. A meal cooked slowly and with full attention. A plant tended through the changing light of a window. A letter written to a grandchild, not listing what you have sacrificed, but offering one thing you paid a price to understand. A long conversation with a stranger who simply needed someone to listen without judgment. These are not small things dressed up as large ones. They are genuinely the things that keep a soul alive. We learn gradually that meaning does not have to be loud to be real. A quiet fire warms the room just as thoroughly as a roaring one. And in the afternoon, the quiet fires are the ones that last. The most dangerous lie the afternoon whispers is this: you are the leftover part of your own life. The story is finished. What remains is only waiting. But that is not what remaining is. Remaining is a season of its own. It has its own weather, its own light, its own particular beauty, the beauty of things that have been lived long enough to become true. Which brings us to the fourth and final thing, the one that quietly holds all the others together, the peace that comes when we stop clinging to the people we love. We come at last to the hardest thing, not the hardest to understand. It is simple enough to understand, the hardest to actually do. Letting go, not of love, not of care, not of the people who matter to us, but of the grip, the white-knuckled, terrified grip of a person who has made another human being the sole guarantee that they will not fall. Freedom stretches only as far as the limits of our consciousness, and nowhere does this truth press harder than in the way we love in old age, or rather in the way we sometimes mistake fear for love and clinging for devotion. It happens quietly. A child who does not call as often as we hoped, a spouse who retreats into their own silence, a friend who drifts the way friends do over long years into a different orbit, a grandchild who forgets a birthday or remembers it and sends only a brief message, not the kind of message that feels like enough. And inside, something tightens. Something interprets the distance as evidence. You are being left behind. You are no longer necessary. The world has moved on without you. This interpretation is almost never true, but it feels true with the particular vividness that feelings have when they are rooted in old, unexamined fears rather than present moment reality. The fear underneath the clinging is ancient. It is the fear of abandonment, of irrelevance, of being forgotten, which is at its heart the fear of not having mattered. And that fear is completely human. There is no shame in it. But when that fear dresses itself in the clothing of love, it becomes something that burdens the people we love most. We think we are simply expressing how much we care. We think we are only asking for what any reasonable person deserves. But the person on the receiving end, the child, the partner, the friend, feels the weight of being needed in a way they cannot fully satisfy, feels the guilt of having their own life to live, feels sometimes that no amount of presence will ever quite be enough, and so we both suffer, the one clinging and the one being clung to. There is an ancient Greek story of two elderly people, Philemon and Baucis, who loved each other so completely, so freely, that when the gods offered them a wish, they asked only to remain together until the very end, so that neither would have to watch the other leave. And at their death, they were transformed into two trees, growing side by side, their branches entwined in the wind, their roots reaching down into the same earth. What strikes me about that image is not the romance of it, though it is romantic. What strikes me is the separateness within the togetherness. Two trees, not one, each with its own trunk, its own posture, its own particular way of reaching toward the light. They are together, and they are each still themselves. That is the model of love that the afternoon asks us to practice. Not the love that says, without you I am nothing, though that love is real, and we have all felt it. But the love that says, having you is one of the great gifts of my life, and I will not reduce that gift by turning it into a rope. The peace that comes from an open hand is not indifference. It is not coldness or distance or the pretense that we do not need anyone. A living heart misses. A living heart aches. A living heart longs for the particular presence of particular people. And that longing is not a weakness. It is proof of a life well loved. But longing does not have to become demand. Missing does not have to become accusation. Distance does not have to be read as abandonment. When we have done the inner work, when we have learned to keep our own company, when we have faced our shadows with some measure of honesty, when we have found a meaning that lives inside us rather than depending entirely on others to provide it, then we have something to stand on. We are not reaching for another person because we are falling. We are reaching for them because we want to hold their hand, not because we need them to hold us up. That shift from dependency to genuine offering changes everything about how love feels on both sides. The practical beginning of this is small and humble. The next time a call goes unanswered, breathe before concluding what it means. The next time a visit is shorter than you hoped, say thank you for what was given rather than tallying what was withheld. The next time you feel the tightening, the urge to pull someone closer than they are able to be in that moment, place your hand on your own chest and remember, I am still here. I am not being abandoned. I am simply in a quieter season. And in that quiet season, something extraordinary becomes possible. Love without fear, presence without demand. The rare and radical gift of allowing the people you love to be exactly who they are, not who you need them to be. And finding that what remains when you stop trying to control it is more than enough. An open hand can receive so much more than a closed fist. Old age does not steal the soul. It only quietly, persistently, with the patience of long life, asks whether you have ever truly lived with it, whether you have sat still long enough to hear what it has been trying to say, whether you have been honest enough to look at all of it, not only the parts you are proud of, whether you have found a meaning that belongs to the person you actually are now, not the person you were at 30, whether you have learned at last to hold the people you love with an open and grateful hand. These four things: a soul that keeps its own company, the courage to face the shadow, a meaning suited to this season, and the peace of not clinging. They do not make life smaller. They make it truer. And truth, in the end, is the only thing the soul ever really wanted. The second half of life has a purpose the first half could never have. Not because youth is lesser, but because depth requires time. A river is fast and clear in its upper reaches, but it is only in the long, slower miles, far from its origin, that it begins to reflect the whole sky. You have lived a long way from your origin. You carry things in you that cannot be measured in any currency the morning understands. The afternoon is here. The light is strange and golden, and unlike anything that came before. Don't waste it wishing for morning. Sit with it. Be in it. Let it show you what it came to show you. You have time yet. And what you do with that time, not in terms of activity, but in terms of presence, may turn out to be the most important thing you have ever done.